only twice in the history of the Scottish Cup have goals been scored direct from a free kick. Is this a bit of history? It is! David Crowther.
Paul McStay. Well, Stuart, you need 2 bites. Now that must be a goal for Dundee. Sheer bedlam around the stadium. Well, you don't need to hear any more news than that. Dundee clearly has scored at Dens. And let's lift off here at Fluff Street. Oh, what incredible scenes.
They're stuck. McAvenny. Frank McAvenny has won the cup for Celtic. Absolutely incredible. Quite remarkable.
Matt, when I think of Celtic in the 80s, I think of that Centenary side. I was born in 1981, so it's guys like Paul McStay, Tommy Burns, Joe Miller even, Billy McNeill as manager, Tommy Craig is his number 2. And it's a time in Celtic that I get particularly nostalgic about. I know it resonates particularly highly with yourself. Tell me why that is and why it resonates with so many in the Celtic world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tino. Yeah, so I guess that's probably the first Celtic team or Celtic era where I feel like I sort of grew up with the players in the sense that the players were of similar age to myself. In some cases, similar background. Charlie Nicholas from Maryhill, same year as me, and I was actually friendly with Charlie's cousin. So it was a team that we could relate to. I think possibly more than any other team before or since, if I'm being honest. And as you say, it's a decade that covers. It's only when you really get into the guts of it, into depth and detail. So you're going from Billy's really in the back of the 10 men win the league era, all the way through to Joe Miller's Hampden winner in '89 and beyond it. And there's everything in there. So we tend to say this every time about the Celtic story. There's the triumph and the tragedy, the highs and the lows, the roller coaster. But my goodness, it's an incredible decade. So yeah, very close to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today, of course, to talk about the new book, Celtic in the 80s, the last book by David Potter, and we'll discuss David a wee bit later in the piece. But yeah, it essentially covers Billy McNeill's reign, which covers 80 to 83, his initial time as manager. When did he come in at first? 70?
He came in 78. He replaced Jock in the summer of 78.
78.
Yeah.
So he's certainly there from 80 to 83. Then Davy Hay comes in,
yes.
83 to 87, and Billy returns ahead of the Centenary season and takes us through to 1990. And the book is generally kind of split between those 3 eras. Is that the way it's set out?
Yeah, it's a great way. It's really, I guess it sort of neatly divides into 3 segments, the 3 managerial tenures, and so many highs and events and characters in between that. So yeah, it's a great story.
Let's get to some of the highs. So a lot of success during that time. 4 league titles, 1981, 1982, 1986, or Love Street as it will always be known, and the Centenary one in 1988. 4 Scottish Cups, all with high drama in different ways.
Yes.
1980, Hampden riots. George McCluskey, are we calling it a deflected effort or a...
No, absolutely. Danny and George worked in that in training.
Okay.
I'm convinced of that. Danny wasn't a great goal scorer, so that was an assist.
Okay, so George McCluskey's winner, 1980 Scottish Cup final, 1985 the 100th Scottish Cup.
Yes.
Celtic come back from a goal down to beat Dundee United, not for the first time.
Yes.
In that decade, but it's Davy Provan. Is that the first free kick in a Scottish Cup final? Was that a moment of history?
I think Archie talks about being the second. Please don't ask me what the first one was, but I can't remember. I can't remember one before that. But yeah, is this a moment of history? Bang.
Yeah.
Top corner, incredible goal.
So Davy Provan free kick followed by Frank McGarvey diving header, incredible goal as well. The 1988 Scottish Cup final, that's Centenary year. It's Frank McAvenny's the man. 2 late goals. We again beat Dundee United 2-1. Kevin Gallagher, the Celtic link, Patsy Gallagher's great nephew.
Grandson.
The grandson. He gets the opener. Tears strips off Roy Aitken, I have to say, for pace.
Can't possibly comment.
And of course, you mentioned Joe Miller there, the 1989 Scottish Cup final, a real favourite. 1-0, Gary Stevens with a short back pass, following a throw-in that wasn't really Celtic's. But
I think that's 50-50.
Yeah, VAR might have caught that one. And there's a League Cup success in there as well, 1982-83 League Cup final. Billy McNeill famously said, Matt, during the Centenary year, there's a fairy tale about Celtic, and there's so many successes to talk about in this decade alone. Pick some of your favourites for us, whether it's a win, a trophy, a season. Where are the standouts for you?
Oh my goodness, where do you start? So The Centenary ones is absolutely classic because that season was a magical season. We'd obviously struggled the year before to do anything really, and Billy had came back in. We're in the doldrums. You don't know if you remember. We played a friendly at the start of the season, and it was against Arsenal at Celtic Park. And Charlie's a hero of mine. I'm broken hearted. Like Charlie, like Kenny when I left, couldn't believe it. But Charlie came back in Celtic with this new Centenary kit and everything else, and they beat us 5-1.
Yeah.
And on the back of that season, you're thinking, where's this going to be? Who would have forecast that by that summer that we would be where we were? It was incredible.
It's funny.
Written the stars, that one for me, Tino.
Someone actually referenced that game in the last couple of weeks. Celtic lost 5-1 to Ajax just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And someone says, well, don't
was
forget. Yeah, you were out there, you were telling us you were in Como.
Yeah.
Causing it with the Ajax fans, I believe. But somebody was saying, no, we lost 5-1 in the Centenary season, so it's not such a bad omen. But no, you never want to lose 5-1. But yeah, what was to follow in that Centenary year? Just incredible, Matt.
Well, that's it. So Billy went out. I mean, Rangers, obviously, the Rangers did pretty much nothing, a few League Cups that decade, but they then, I guess, changed the landscape a wee bit when they brought Souness back for Sampdoria. And then they spent serious money. They brought half the England team, it seemed to be landing there. So we were really up against it. But I think sometimes that's when we're at our best. Billy came back and immediately you get a lift. Billy, absolute hero, Mr. Celtic for me. But his signings initially were, I don't know, conservative, I guess, small C. It was Andy Walker from Motherwell, Billy Stark, journeyman maybe. I love Billy. But at that time, a journeyman, 75,000 from Aberdeen. So they were not. Initially, they were not huge signings. Chris Morris for Sheffield Wednesday, didn't really know anything about Chris, but they just seemed to hit the ground running. And then they had this mentality where they would keep going to the end. The number of times that we clinch games, up replays or whatever, by scoring late goals, winning games. Hampden semi-final, there's one. Hampden semi-final against Hearts must be, 75,000 again, huge crowd. And my cousin from Ireland was over, and we're still going for this Centenary double and whatever, and we had a couple of minutes to go thinking, this young lads came over here and it's all going pear-shaped. Hart scored by a goal, sort of big, long cross. Don't know if you remember it, Tino. Warner goes up with, I think it's McPherson, and the ball ends up in the net, gives a goal. And with 3 minutes to go, with a goal down, and the whole thing's looking as if, it's done. And then we scored, we don't just equalise and get a replay or whatever, we scored 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the place is just, it's absolute bedlam. So then again, the final quarter, as you say, Kevin Gallagher's a player I thought should have been with us. And David alludes to that as well in the book. Kevin Gallagher bought to play for Celtic, chose not to. I think part of that was his grandfather thought he would be unfairly compared, him and all the. It's a huge, the Divers and the Gallaghers, a huge sort of diaspora of footballers coming down from parts. Anyway, Kevin scores that goal, and you're thinking, is this written in the stars? Patsy Gallagher scored against Dundee in 25 with the somersault goal. Was his grandson going to do for the treble? Then again, Frank McAvenny signed that year. Frank comes, Anton Rogan beat Cross. Frank scores a goal, then scores a gate right at the end. And I remember being a glorious day, absolutely crammed in the Celtic end, and just absolute chaos. So, but Billy was right, the fairy tale club. I don't know if we'll ever repeat that kind of season with the emotion and everything else that was charged. So, I mean, that was just one highlight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the way back for, the start, you talked about the Hampden Cup final of 80, but title wins at Tannadice. We effectively won the first title. So Billy had obviously won his first title in 79, but the first title of the 80s, because Aberdeen had then won. Ferguson's side, for the first time in 25 years, they won at Easter Road. We sort of lost, we sort of blew it a wee bit, if we're being honest. A theme that would recur as well. You'd be there and thereabouts. For the ones we didn't win, we sort of lost right at the death. But anyway, Aberdeen were building the side that eventually would win a European trophy. We were fairly dominant in Scotland for a few years. And then we managed to bounce back again under Billy in 1981. We had that great night at Tannadice midweek when Charlie had scored at Ibrox on the Saturday, which meant I think we could only be caught in goal difference. Still, you needed that point. Up to Tannadice, and they were a great side as well, and we won that. I remember Danny being carried shoulder high round, around Tannadice, the old Tannadice with the open. It was just wonderful memories.
And Danny speaks of that, Matt. So Danny kindly wrote the foreword to the book.
Yes, he did.
I read it just in the last couple of days, and he speaks about Love Street as his enduring memory, his favourite memory. But he also speaks about that very moment you mentioned, being held aloft by the players at Tannadice. Before I forget, when you were talking about the Centenary season, there is no end of Celtic media out there, Matt, particularly in this day and age. But one of the best pieces you will ever watch, and I know you'll have watched it, and I know so many watching and listening will have watched it, was that Centenary season video, the VHS one that came out on the back of that year. It's actually available in its entirety on YouTube just now. I'll maybe link it under the show here.
Lovely.
But it's just such a brilliant piece, and there's so many of those quotes. So there's Billy McNeill talking about the fairy tale. It opens with Bill Shankly talking about Celtic Football Club is the most successful football club in the world. There's no doubt about that. I think almost word for word.
Okay.
It's narrated by Hugh McIlvanney. Billy Connolly talks in it at different points. Billy Connolly talks about, Celtic fans or other fans getting stressed at being 1-0 down, and Connolly's like, there's 3 minutes to go. What's the hassle here? It's such a good piece, and it encapsulates everything about Celtic at that time. And listen, we've had so much success since, there was so much success before it.
Yep.
But it's hard to picture a more fairy tale is the word when you think about, particularly that season, 80s in general. There's a lot going on, but that Centenary year, there was just something incredible about it, Matt.
No, I mean, it was crazy. I don't know how you would ever actually define it. It just seemed that everything sort of came together. And a lot of it was emotion. A lot of it was charged by the support in this young team. But he basically built a team from scratch to take on Rangers, who had, as I said, 4 or 6 England internationals, really strong squad. And by the end of the season, I actually think it was Hearts that were close at the Celtic by the end of the season. We beat them early on. Billy Stark scored. You maybe remember this one, Tino. I know you're like a lot younger. I know the 80s, towards the end of the 80s, remember Billy Stark, first game again, Glory State at Celtic Park. Billy scores early on, up at the far end, and then there's a challenge. You remember Billy Stark loses his boot at one point, but it doesn't stop Mr. Souness putting in an aggressive challenge on him. And of course, he saw red. I think he saw red against George McCluskey. Easter Road, the very first game of the season.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot riding in that year.
Yeah.
But Celtic just seemed to grow in confidence, and winning's a habit, and they put that distance. We actually should have we should have done the whitewash that year. I remember being at Ibrox and we were 2 goals up, and they got a goal back, and then they equalised right literally in the dying seconds. I think it was Gough that scored right in front of us in the Broom loan, and then we beat them in New Year. Again, Macca, Paul McStay, probably the best pass you'll ever see.
It was shown a few times in recent days, given Paul McStay's appearance at Celtic Park.
A wee pirouette, has a wee look round, and then he sticks it inside. See you later. Chris Morris, first time cross. Macca, as always, in there. He smashes it away. And then in the second half, classic Machiavelli header, flick up to the top end. And then the one probably that, in my head, I think, you know me, I'm very, very cautious, but probably late March, maybe April, we played them at Ibrox, the 4th game of the season. It's still potentially be caught, but if we win, we won't be. And again, McStay was never known, I don't think, for left foot shots. He was always a right. His screamers tend to be with right, but he hits this volley for the left foot, and again, right as a broom loan. And I think Andy Walker chest one in towards the end. So I think we took maybe 2 points for the win back then, 7 points out of 8, and that finished them. So it was just it just seemed to go from high to high. Cup ties at Firhill, cup replays at Easter Road. Whenever they needed to pull something out the fire, they found. So a wee bit similar to the teams in recent years. They found a wee bit extra.
Yeah,
the mark of a great side.
Found a way to win. We're going to revisit Paul McStay and some of the key players just a bit further into the piece, Mark. But just as you mentioned, Billy Stark, it's interesting. Billy Stark sat in that very seat. Billy was here a couple of years ago now, recalling that Centenary season, and it was great.
Yes.
To have him in. So many good stories. Obviously, a hugely close relationship between him and Tommy Burns, and he spoke of that and spoke about those memories. But Billy Stark was one of those guys who came in under the radar. I think you mentioned 75 grand there or thereabouts. 31 at the time, I think.
Yes.
But that story, he told that story that, in the middle of the park, he was involved in a challenge. I think Peter Grant, he told the story that Peter Grant sold him a hospital ball. He loses his boot in the Stramash. As he jumps up, he's got a boot in his hand, and Souness comes right through the bootless left foot. Just crazy stuff. But great stories from Billy Stark, and definitely a huge part that he played in that Centenary season. Matt, there's so many highs, and we've spoken about the trophy successes, but like life, like competitive sport, and certainly like football, you can't have the highs without the lows. There was some down times during those eras as well.
There were many. And I think there's also a wee bit of context in there that perhaps maybe for younger listeners, Aberdeen and Dundee United, they were sensational sides. So I guess that was Celtic's real competition for probably the best part of that decade. Aberdeen, Dundee United, they were actually doing really well. They were really well set off for European success as well. I mean, United got to the European Cup semi-final, really harshly done by in Rome.
They were cheated, weren't they? It was proven after the fact the ref took a bung. It's all right. You won't get sued.
It's a strong word, but I mean,
allegedly.
I remember. I think the game was in the afternoon. I remember taking a half day off at work to watch that game live. So the final was in Rome as well. So that was the one with Grobbelaar did the wobbly legs and the penalty shootout. Anyway, Dundee United had beat them 2-0, and they missed out. They also got to later on, 87. They got to the UEFA Cup final. surprisingly, in my sense, they beat by Gothenburg because they were beating Barcelona's and Mönchengladbach's tremendous side. Aberdeen, local no, got to won the Cup Winners' Cup one year, got to the semis the following year, and narrowly beat by Porto. So these were tremendous sides,
Yeah.
and Celtic were up against them. So I remember speaking to someone fairly recently and saying it was an era where we didn't. If you look at volumes of trophies, we won our fair share, but we weren't dominant to the extent, for example, that we are now. But it's an era I look back on with huge fondness because see when you did win a trophy, I don't know, was there that extra edge? See when you knocked Aberdeen or Dundee United out, or beat them in the final or whatever. I just felt it meant a wee bit more because probably the most competitive Scottish era since maybe the 60s when the Lions were taken, when Scottish sides were regularly last four or finalists in Europe. So for me, the 80s, I'm not sure we'll see it again. Finances have pushed Celtic and other clubs away,
It's interesting
That
actually at
makes
this
sense.
time. So it's Jim McLean's Dundee United,
Yeah.
it's Alex Ferguson's Aberdeen, and I think
Yeah.
the 84-85 season was the last time a non-Glasgow side
Yes.
won the Scottish League title. The reason it's topical just now is that Tony Bloom has invested in Hearts. Tony
Yeah.
Bloom is the kind of high rolling current chairman of Brighton.
Yes.
He's involved with Union Saint-Gallois in Belgium, and he's invested some 10 million in Hearts, and he believes that I was calling it the Glasgow duopoly, but it's not really a duopoly, is it?
Well, if he's challenging Celtic's dominance, bring it on. That's
This is
great
it.
to hear.
So whether
Absolutely.
it's Hearts are looking stronger,
Yeah.
at the moment, Hibs are doing some things, Aberdeen are doing some things.
Yes.
I think most, Matt, would welcome the kind of challenge that we got back in the 80s because that's what
Yes.
made it one of those most exciting decades in Celtic's history.
Yeah, there's no question. Surprisingly, the crowds didn't really reflect that. So there wouldn't be huge crowds rolling up to see other than maybe your sort of Aberdeen, Dundee United. But yeah, as I'm saying, when you got those victories, they were much more meaningful. And personally, I mean, I love to see my team winning. There's nothing quite like it. But if you're winning in a more competitive environment, I think it's just that wee bit extra. So yeah, the 80s was all of that. Great opposition, great Scottish players. Not so many continental players until the latter part of that decade. But some probably it's 40 years now, which is scary. But it's probably the last real sort of generational. When you look across, you could probably name most of the sides. Hearts had a smashing side as well for a couple of years, but United, Aberdeen, and Celtic, they were great sides, and it's a really wonderful era for football.
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about the domestic success. So 4 league titles, 4 Scottish Cups,
Yep.
a League Cup, so 9 trophies in total.
Yep.
But what about Europe? So there were some incredible Celtic sides during that decade, but didn't quite do it in Europe. There was some kind of near misses to an extent. But talk us through the European adventures during that time.
Yeah, it's a real roller coaster. I guess maybe the first thing to say is a different setup then, in the sense of everything was knockout.
Mhm.
So, for example, going right back, 1981, Celtic won the first title of the 80s in 81. We talked about it, Tannadice. Who did we get in the European Cup first round? Juventus. So Juventus have got pretty much the Italian side that would win the World Cup the following year later. But anyway, we played them at Celtic Park, full house. Juventus, Murdo scores. Celtic always used to win these games. Murdo scores, and we went to Turin. We had a single goal lead. That was actually my first continental. I won't tell you my age, give it away. That was my first continental. My first European game was actually in Dundalk in '79. We went to Dundalk and we were hanging on for grim death to beat them, and then we got knocked out with Real Madrid. But in 1981, we went to Stadio Comunales. It was a crazy place for a week. I probably spent a week running around Turin getting chased, but they were a great side. But away goals count. Celtic were 2 goals. They scored 2 great goals the first half. Verdes and Roberto Bettiger, and we're hanging on with no Danny McGrain. So big David Moyes made his debut centre half at right back. I also remember that, and we came in thinking, but no Danny. But fair play to the guys, Frank McGarvey and whatever, went close. And right up to the final whistle, a Celtic goal takes us through. They knew that, and as I said, the place was absolutely crazy. I've never seen anything like it. But so one tie and you're out by September, which is quite harsh. Following year, much better. Following year, we get Ajax. Johan Cruyff's last real, I guess, stint at Ajax. Again, you may or may not remember this game. One of the best European matches I've ever seen. September '82, Celtic against Ajax, European Cup, first round. Finished 2 each. It was 2 each at half time. Could have been anything. They had Jesper Olsen and Lerby and Big Mulby. And as I say, Cruyff, genius. Just played with slippers on touch and gave away a penalty for him, I think. broke Tommy Burns down. But that game finished 2-each. If we're being realistic, we probably thought we're going to struggle. And then again, the magic, the fairy tale kicks in. We go over to Amsterdam. Charlie scores an absolute wonder goal where he chips him. We then lose the classic Celtic European goal. It creeps in at the back post and probably just leave it at that. And with a minute to go, they take Cruyff off so he can get his round of applause, and he's walking limping around the park. While he's doing that, Celtic conjure up this great move. Balls get moved, and George McCluskey squeezes one in, and Celtic are through. Who do we get? Champions of Spain, Sociedad. And again, we're doing well until about 20 minutes to go, and then we lost a goal, and as tends to happen, quickly lost another goal, and then they scored first at Celtic Park. Arcanada. Remember Arcanada, goalkeeper? But Murdo still, Celtic never gave up. Murdo scores twice, but we're knocked out. So it's a wee bit like that.
Why do you think, Matt, given... So, yeah, so it's near misses against quality sides, but
Absolutely.
we were a quality side. You know, we
Yeah.
real quality operators, maybe at the peak of their powers at, at different times, depending on what players you want to talk about.
Yeah.
Why do you think we couldn't, we were struggling to get beyond Christmas, weren't we, during those times?
Absolutely.
Was it a bit of luck of the draw? And obviously knockout, there's so much more at stake, and it's little margin for error, but we just couldn't quite replicate some of our previous successes.
I think all of that's absolutely valid. Again, never ever be critical individual players. It's just not my thing. But if you look back at Celtic, we had some wonderful attacking players. But if you look at Aberdeen and Dundee United, they maybe were stronger in that back division.
Okay.
So a combination of the Aberdeen and Dundee United defence and Celtic moving forward, exempt Danny from that, and maybe bring in Gordon Strachan. You've got a side that could probably win the European Cup. So a wee bit of bad luck, but also maybe defensively we weren't as strong. So if you're taking on Juventus with the Italian World Cup back four, and we didn't seem to be able to keep clean sheets. We'd lose goals. But probably I think there were probably 2 years in that decade where I think we could really done something. The first was that year. I really felt had we beaten Sociedad that year, I think who was the final? It was Hamburg beat Juventus, I think, in the final. We really had a chance of going a bit further. Who knows?
Kevin Keegan's Hamburg?
It was Kevin Keegan's Hamburg, yeah. He was a European Player of the Year at the time. They signed this young guy called Dalglish who would never fill his boots.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about Kevin Keegan, lovely man as he is, but Kenny was a genius. But so there was that year where I thought just a wee bit of luck at the draw. Having beaten Ajax, you get the Spanish champions who were a tremendous side. And then the other one, which we'll possibly talk about, was in '84. This time the Cup Winners' Cup, so maybe a more manageable, maybe a more realistic chance for Celtic, and having taken Rapid Vienna and beaten Rapid Vienna here, who went to the final against Everton. Then obviously that's a story there. I still cringe about that story, but had we got past Rapid Vienna, which I think would have taken us into the quarterfinals, then there was no reason. The final was at Rotterdam as well. Can you imagine Celtic and Everton, the final in Rotterdam? That would have been special.
Let's cover Rapid Vienna quickly.
Oh, we got to.
Fans of a certain era still haven't forgiven them. My dad is annoyed that Celtic bought Nicholas Kuhn off Rapid Vienna. He thinks we shouldn't even do business with them now in the modern day, such as the high feeling that ran through fans at the time. Yep. Talk us through what became a three-legged affair then.
Yes.
Old Trafford was the venue for the third one, but talk us through for anyone that doesn't know that story.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a story like that, a situation like that since. As usual, we're centre stage. So first legs in Vienna, pretty straightforward. We lose 3-1. We have Alan McInally, who only recently joined us, sent off. Brian McClare's goal gives us that hope. So I think we lose 3-1 in the Rapid Stadium. A niggly game, a tough game, but no one would have any idea what was to come. At Celtic Park, Celtic were incredible. They ran all over the top of them. It's 3-0. We went 3-0. We missed a penalty. They absolutely lost the plot. I think the big defender punches Tommy Burns in the side of the head. They were unhappy at Tommy's challenge. Again, 50-50. Would VAR allowed the goals? Tommy slides in the goalkeeper. The ball breaks and we go. It's 3-0, and then we miss after all the carry on. I'll come back to that. Peter Grant missed a penalty. It was made at 4. But anyway, what happens is there's a player goes down over towards the jungle while they're arguing about something. Over at the jungle, there's something gets flung out from the crowd, and you see it as clear as day on the TV. It lands about 30 yards away to the guy who goes down clutching his head. And of course, next thing you see him, he looks at something at 40 Towers with the bandages. A carry on movie. And so Rapid appealed. Rapid were threatening to leave the park. Hans Krankel was the captain at the time, famous Austrian striker. They threatened to leave the park. It's a bit bedlam. Crowds going nuts. As I say, Celtic on the night destroyed them by far and away better side. And when the UEFA sit down to do their findings, they fine Celtic for understandably for the object being thrown for the ground. Fine Rapid, I think, twice that amount for the behaviour of their players. So, and everybody sort of thinks, well, that's probably reasonable. Then, bizarrely, I don't know, a week later, 2 weeks later, comes that Rapid appeal that. What they do is they double Rapid's fine. They double their fine, whatever it is, from 5,000 to 10,000 euros or Swiss francs, it maybe would be at that time. But they then order a replay of the game to be played something like 150 kilometres away from Celtic Park. So it leaves you a choice of Pittodrie or moving down to Anfield or Old Trafford to play. Celtic, obviously, looking at the crowd and whatever else, decide to go to Old Trafford. Probably, in my opinion, people maybe correct me, I think it's the biggest travelling support ever, and probably only beaten by Seville many years later. The biggest travelling support ever goes down to Old Trafford in December. It's a cold night. Remember, we were on a bus at the time. We were down there before. I have never, before or since, heard an atmosphere like it. It was absolutely poison, even from the warm-up. Poison. And actually, rather than help us, I actually think that harmed us. And the game is always defined in a single move. We're in the corner. We're in the corner facing where the cameras are, just next to the Stretford end. Up at the far end, I think it's Roy Aitken that hits the post and it gets scrambled clear. But the clearance actually turns into a breakaway. There's a player called Peter Packle, who's lightning fast, and he ends up running the length of the park, running round the goalkeeper for memory and taps it in. So in the space of 30 seconds, instead of winning the game, because obviously it's a D, so we're still 2 goals down for the first leg. The 3-0 is wiped. We're 2 goals down, and they get the first goal, so it's 4-1 in aggregate. We don't recover, but even worse than that, then we get 1 or 2 numpties decide to attack players at the time and right at the kickoff, which of course it turns a situation which is bad enough into an even worse scenario, because we're then given a suspension or closed doors ban, the following year. So Rapid Vienna didn't just cost Celtic that season, as I say. Just to twist the knife, Rapid went to the final with Everton. There's banners. I remember watching the TV saying Celtic should be here and whatever, crazy stuff. But they went to play against Everton, who were going to win a league title. They were a tremendous side as well. So, but that'd have been a great final. And then the following year, who did we get? Atletico Madrid. We actually get, bizarrely for Celtic at that time, because we couldn't buy an away goal and an away win. No matter who we're playing, we'd done all our damage at Celtic Park. But Celtic managed to get a draw in the Vicente Calderon. But then we've got to come back and play them with one man and his dog. There's people waiting outside at barriers. Remember, I'm being at work at the time and getting updates for, on the radio, and I just heard we're a goal down, and again, we're 2-0 down. So just a whole 12 months, and of course, Celtic's reputation crashed.
Yeah.
So just a horrible scenario, really was.
Do you harbour any bad feeling towards Vienna now? Does that hang over?
Is that coming across? Well, I mean,
you can see where my dad's coming from. I'm thinking in the modern era.
Yeah,
so that was, I was just 3 years of age when that all happened. So no proper memories of the time. But there's just genuine bad feeling amongst a certain generation that witnessed that at first hand. And do you harbour those kind of feelings yourself, or is it just bygone era?
Well, it's probably somewhere in the middle. I've got an awful lot of bitterness into their behaviour at Celtic Park. So let's see if we can just focus on that. What they done at Celtic Park, the original ban, the original decision was correct. There was an object thrown on, not acceptable, and the behaviour of those players, not acceptable. That should have been it, and we should have moved on. So yeah, I grudge against. As much as anything else, I guess a grudge against UEFA. I thought it was a dreadful decision. So who knows why that came? But it's 40 years ago. I know I was also at Atletico Madrid.
Let it go, Matt. It's 40 years ago.
Let it go. I was Atletico Madrid, a wee lad, when obviously that night, 10 years earlier, 74, and again we said that when we played them again. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Realistic now, 40, 50 years down the line, I don't know. I understand it. But I think there's bigger things in my life than harbouring those kind of grudges.
Maybe
to be honest.
Maybe not in 1984 though. Maybe that
certainly not in 1984. A different answer.
But no, we've spoken at points already, Matt, some real highs and some real lows, and that would certainly feature amongst the lows. But
Yep.
let's focus for now on some of the players, and there's obviously some real standout players from that time. We've mentioned Danny McGrain.
Yes.
He's the cover star of the book, actually.
Yeah.
A great action shot of Danny on the front cover. As I say, he wrote the foreword, and we've spoken about some of his big moments, Love Street 86 and
Yes.
Tannadice as well. Paul McStay, and let's stay with Paul McStay for a moment. Brilliant to welcome Paul McStay back to Celtic
Yeah.
Park on Sunday. He obviously unfurled the flag on Flag Day.
Yep.
And what a rousing reception he got, didn't
Yeah,
he?
it was magic.
It was brilliant to see and brilliant to hear. For those who are maybe of a younger generation that ask that question, was Paul McStay really that good, or how good was he? What would your response be to that?
Oh, it was that good. It was that good and better. I was going to say that somebody asked the question the other day about on social media, and Paul should maybe have went onside. Now, if Paul had left to join any of the clubs in the world that he could have played for, from a reputational point of view, it probably have done Paul good. But it broke my heart and that of the Celtic supporters, because McStay was outstanding. I first remember, again, like Charlie Nicholas and Paul McStay, you would see the names coming through the Celtic view. They were coming up through the ranks. But I remember seeing the England-Scotland schoolboy international, which was a big thing at the time. One or two players. George McCluskey's another one that made his name, and his brother John. Anyway, Paul McStay, Celtic, I think Scotland won 5-4, and McStay was outstanding. So he was. People were desperate to get him in the team. I don't know how Billy must have held back. I was at Paul's debut, which I believe it was against Queen of the South. I think it was about 7,000 there. It was Queen of the South in the Scottish Cup, but the following week, when we had a boycott at Pittodrie, we didn't go. And I think we were the Celtic bus that didn't go. You look at the telly, and there was 10,000 behind the goal. Paul, Aberdeen, as I say, top side at the time. Paul scores a goal, and he never went out of the team after that. So he was only 17.
Yeah.
Fabulous player.
Can I ask you just quickly, why was there a boycott at that time?
Because I think Aberdeen were continually cutting the number of tickets available to Celtic.
Right.
Fairly sure
So
that
it wasn't against Celtic.
stand to be corrected.
It was an Aberdeen issue.
Yes, it was Aberdeen were cutting our ticket allocation because they were doing well.
Mhm.
Celtic fans who'd been going in their thousands for years all of a
Got you.
sudden found the more things change, etc.
There's a bit of that
Yeah.
going on. But Paul McStay, it's just you say there was several opportunities where he could have left the club.
Yes.
Inter Milan and various
Yeah.
Italian clubs were mentioned.
Yeah.
You can maybe remind me, because I can't quite remember when it was, but there was a time, I think it was the last game of the season at Celtic Park, where he took the shirt
Yes,
off and threw
yes.
the boots into the crowd and made his way back across the turf. And
Oh,
you
that was
thought,
it.
that's it.
Absolutely.
McStay's gone. And then they announced that he signed a new deal
Yes.
in the summer. But what was going on at that time?
Well, I think that might have been about 90. I'm thinking that's maybe about 92. And you're right, he came back and said we left absolutely. It wasn't a great time to be a Celtic fan as it was. I guess McStay leaving would have been nice in the cake, but thankfully I think he signed a 5-year deal at the time. But I mean, it's just, for a young guy, he came into, you mentioned already, he came into this side packed full of wonderful players, experienced guys, and immediately he looked the best player there.
Yeah.
Tall, Paul couldn't have been much off his 6 foot, upright, always looking, always thinking, quiet, unassuming off the park. But again, did his talking on the park, scored great goals, set up goals that we talked about, like Macca's and whatever. And a tremendous player. He could dig, he could score. Paul McStay had everything. He literally could have played for anyone.
Yeah.
And only Paul will know why he didn't. That's a question for him. I'm delighted he didn't. But on a personal note for him, it might have been nice for him to just to shut some of the nonsense up that he couldn't. We heard it for Henrik.
Yeah.
We heard it for Kenny. So Henrik won the European Cup just to prove him wrong. So in a way, it'd be nice if Paul had done something similar. But he had one broken-hearted Matt Corr, and I don't know how many other Celtic fans waiting in their tea.
Absolutely. So he obviously came through, early 80s throughout that whole decade, and then when he eventually retired, I think it was 97.
It was.
He'd been struggling to come back from a couple of different injuries.
Yes.
I think he was only 32 when he retired. I know we're getting into the 90s here, and we'll get back to the focus in a minute, but I think he was only 32.
Born in 64, spot on.
Something like that. So, but no, an absolute Celtic hero. Great to see him back at Celtic Park this weekend. There's various other players we could mention here, Matt. Roy Aitken, hugely popular figure, now club ambassador at Celtic.
Yes.
Tommy Burns, his legend goes without saying.
Yeah.
Some phenomenal strikers of that time, and I'll rhyme off some of them, and there's one that I need to mention. Charlie Nicholas, Frank McAvenny, Frank McGarvey, Andy Walker, Brian McClare, and Mo Johnson. And incredibly, Matt, these are all, I know the game has changed, but these are all homegrown talents. These are guys that Celtic brought through the ranks, and what you would give to have some of those players in the first team right now.
Oh my goodness! With the greatest respect, I mentioned at the top of the show here, we could relate to these guys. So if you're sort of mad at the start of the 80s, I'm still in my teens, no laughing at the back, and then going all the way through that. So these players these are guys who are literally living your dream, wearing your hoops in front of you. So it's magic. So when you list that sort of area of talent, you do wonder why there was no more trophies or European success. But I mean, these guys it was like a conveyor belt of just wonderful and also great characters. I'm generalising here, but just guys by and large, I'm just casting my name through. I'm probably right in saying every one of them would have been a Celtic fan growing up. I'm just casting my thoughts through the list there. Every one of those guys would have been a Celtic fan growing up as well. So it's an incredible thing, and to have them living the dreams, I say, surrounded by Murdos and Tommies and whatever other guys. So not everyone came in as Celtic fans, but that was a team that we could really relate to. I would remember being in like Rotterdam, I think about 82, and the team are floating through the town with tracksuits, and they'd stop and put a photo and all that. Just it's a different era, Tino, as well. So you mentioned Billy Stark. We'd have our Player of the Year dances, and the players would come. Charlie was there. Pat Bonner was there. Billy Stark and his wife. What lovely people, so up and sing the Celtic song and whatever, just couldn't do enough for you. So Peter Grant, it's a great era. It make me quite nostalgic here, Tino.
That's what it's all about. That's what this book in essence will be about. There's so many household names there that we've rhymed off, Matt, but there's a whole host of other figures who may be seen as unsung heroes. I put Billy Stark in that category, and we've discussed Billy already.
Okay.
But there's other players that had huge moments for Celtic, Mark McGee, Joe Miller, even Mick McCarthy.
Yes.
A lot of guys. Is there anyone, either, those guys that you'd want to touch on, or anyone else who you feel was maybe an unsung hero of the 80s?
That's a great question. So, I don't know. Maybe somebody like Tom McAdam. Tom McAdam signed as a centre forward by Jock from Dundee United, and then as a sort of injury crisis needs must, and he was asked to move back to centre half, and actually that's where he spent most of his career. So Tom McAdam, these are guys who season in, season out played. Another one, maybe not all that length of time, Danny Crary. So there was a season amongst that where both Frank McGarvey and Charlie Nicholas broke their legs in the same season. Imagine that now. 2 leg breaks, and Celtic won the title. And a large part of why they won the title, that would be 82. A large part of why they won the title was they brought in Danny Crary to play, I think, beside George McCluskey up front. And Danny would score like a hat trick at Firhill and whatever, so scoring vital points. So you're right, Mark Reid at left back. Another guy came through, I think Mark came through the ranks, certainly came in. Danny at one time had moved to left back, to accommodate Alan Snedden, I think. But then when Mark Reid came to left back, Danny came to, in my opinion, his preferred position, and they became pretty much the full back partnership for a long time. I think it would be Derek White before he came in here. So in that early part, certainly there's possibles. George McCluskey, George McCluskey should be on that list if. In my view, George left in 83, possibly why he's no, but obviously he was in before 1980. But another guy who scored goals, wonderful talent. I think went to Leeds United. So George, Charlie, and Billy all left the same summer, and everybody focused on, Charlie and Billy. But George McCluskey was taking another 25 goals at your team. He's a great team. Came in as a winger. He had talent to burn. And still working at Celtic Park as well.
Yeah,
great friend of Big Tommy. God rest them, they were in a partnership. So yes, so many, Tino. I hope I've not offended anybody missing them out.
I know,
many.
We can't name them all, but you touched on even like Derek White. There's what I call them cult heroes: Anton Rogan, Owen Archdeacon, guys like that.
Cup final, Centenary. It's his goal. It's his ball for non-stop running. Rogan gave it everything. Irish boy. Living the dream. So so many
guys. Absolutely. Matt, let's touch on the author. So David Potter, this was David's last book, and I know you and David were close, and I want to ask you about that in a second, but David wrote some 30 plus books on Celtic over the years before he sadly passed away in July of 2023. There's also a fitting tribute within the book by David's wife Rosemary, and that's a really nice thing to read. I've read that in the last couple of days. But for those who aren't familiar with David, can you tell us a bit about him and your own relationship with him?
Yeah, absolutely. David's an incredible character, wasn't he, David? So David, from about 1996, so classics teacher, amateur actor, drama. He loved his cricket, he loved his history, he loved everything. I guess I shouldn't really speak for David, but maybe I loved the Celtic just that wee bit more. But for about 1996, David had managed to write something like 71 books. pretty much half of which were about Celtic. So he would go back and talk about McMenemy and Delaney and pretty much single-handedly bringing some of these Alec McNeill, bringing some of these guys to the attention of readers who just would not know that. So that was David. Just love reading David Foxtell's story. It says David would self-publish, so it would literally cost David money to publish books. Why would you do that? Well, I'm not a member of a golf club, so instead of paying golf fees,
This is his thing.
this is my thing. I love that. So it wasn't
Yeah.
about. I love that. It wasn't about money for David. Didn't say he cost no money. And thankfully, the last 5 years when he was working with us, then we managed to turn that around a wee bit. And again, with this one, we're doing exactly that because we're literally looking after the family here as we would expect. David's our friend, so he done all this. I only knew him. Sadly, I only knew him for about 5 years, or when I get involved with the Celtic Star books, and David was writing articles. So quite a short friendship in the overall scheme of things. But my goodness, what an impact he made! So lovely guy. People will know him as the teacher. People will know him obviously. Family's a granddad, a dad, loving husband. But I guess as a pal, when you were sitting talking to him, Celtic, everything, he didn't miss. He wouldn't miss you. And if he didn't agree with you, he would say, he'd maybe say something. And if he didn't, you get a look and you think, oh, right, we're not in the same place. So loved the Celtic, home and away, came back, would write stuff, very friendly with John Fallon, God rest him.
He wrote John's book, didn't he?
He wrote John's book, amongst others, and he was still keeping in touch with. I heard that he kept in contact with John even after each match. He'd come back and they would chew the fat. So he had these contacts. So yeah, he wrote all these wonderful books, and he would stories to burn. I guess I see them in a slightly different light because if you're editing his work or working with his work, then he would have these. I mentioned maybe when we spoke before, he'd have these one-liners. So he would have in this mature conversation about a subject. Well, David, I think you should say that rather than that. Are you okay? Oh, no, I like that word, Matt. That works here, so that's fine. No, David's word is final. And then he would throw in a one-liner that just finish you, So,
Yeah.
so I guess that was nice. So I was going to say a complex character, but in a very, very nice way.
Yeah.
So many strings to his bow, all of which he did superbly well. And I guess writing about Celtic, well, my goodness.
And
Incredible stuff.
the club, did they award him like a special recognition award?
Yeah.
Was that at the Hydro event?
It was, aye.
So
it was.
was that picked up by Rosemary?
It was, and fair
Yeah.
play to her. So, 11, 12,000 in the Hydro, and Rosemary came on, still absolutely grieving, so it was a posthumous award. Rosemary came on and answered the questions, and I was there that night, wasn't a dry eye in the house. And the reception, you talked about the reception for Paul McStay at the weekend, the reception for David and the Hydro was just off the scale. I thought it was a wonderful gesture with Celtic. So, we look after our own. I love it. Whether you're on the park or whether you're in the background, Celtic done I'm proud, and Rosemary done I'm proud that night. That was lovely. Very, very fitting. So yeah,
Yeah.
special recognition award for
I know.
what was it? I can't remember exactly the words that was used, but for his contribution. Well, my goodness, what a contribution that was, and continues to be.
Absolutely. And it's great to hear the words by Rosemary, as I say, I've read them through. Lovely to hear, lovely to see the club recognise David in this way. And I know that he's sadly missed by yourself and so many, Matt. And you're very proud of this, his final piece of work that we're talking about today. I want to close out our discussion today by speaking about the managers during that decade. And it's basically two figures that cover the whole 80s. It's, as touched on at the start, Billy McNeill, 80 to 83, Davy Hay, 83 to 87, and then Billy sees out the rest of the decade through to 1990.
Okay.
Billy McNeill's significance as a Celtic figure doesn't even need discussion. An absolute legend, Mr. Celtic, you called him earlier on, and rightly so. I want to touch on Davy Hay for a moment because his time, as a manager is a bit more interesting. And the way it finished, it's generally the opinion is that it was quite poorly handled by the club. So he makes way for Billy McNeill to come back for the centenary year. He'd lifted the title, the year prior, although he'd lost out in the most recent one to Rangers. But a hugely popular figure.
Yes.
And he was heartbroken. I've read some of his own words on it. The Quiet Assassin, David Hay's nickname.
Yes.
I've read some of the quotes from the book there. And there's a wee topic of debate that Celtic asked him to resign. That's a suggestion anyway. Jack McGinn was the chairman, asked him to resign. He refused and then became what was reported at the time as the first Celtic manager to be sacked. You and I had a wee chat on that. You're not sure if Jock Stein was sacked, and there's a wee bit of kind of ambiguity there. But what do you think about Davy Hay's contribution to Celtic and his exit at that time during the 80s?
Well, first and foremost, his contribution to Celtic is immense. As a player, he was an absolute fabulous player. Again, one of the early guys to leave and go down south, and I think there was, basically couldn't agree a contract with Celtic, and I don't think David really wanted to leave. So contribution immense. A player came back. I think the circumstances in which David would become the manager would probably not be his choosing, because Billy McNeill left under. We lost Billy. We sort of lost it. If you think about that summer, a dreadful summer, we lost the league right at the very death, despite that comeback at Ibrox and rumours in the stand that Dundee had equalised and scored or whatever. I don't never understand who starts that. We lost the league, and then we sort of knew we were losing Charlie because the media had been building that up for several months. And then surprisingly, we lost Billy, went to Manchester City. So it was like, dear me, what's happening here? So and also, as I said, George McCluskey. So the summer that David came in, and he had the challenge of trying to replace. So he's replacing Billy. That's a task in itself. So thankfully, it was a good Celtic man we brought in. But we've tried to replace Charlie, and with the greatest respect to individuals, and I won't name them, the guys they brought in, as compared to the guys, it was an awful time. So he had a real challenge. Davy's first season, I think we finished runners up in all three trophies. We were really harshly done by in a League Cup final. Valentine, surprise, awarded 2 penalties against us, and we lost in extra time. Ever coming back for 2-0 down. We lost the Scottish Cup final to Aberdeen in ridiculous circumstances. Roy Aitken sent off after about 20 minutes, and Mark McGee, Gordon Strachan involved in that. So David has 1 or 2 thoughts on that in the book, as you can imagine. And even with 10 men against this wonderful Aberdeen side, who we talking about? Paul McStay salvages, he takes us into extra time, and then we lose another pretty basic error in who scores the winning goal. Mark McGee, who many blamed for Roy getting sent off. So he lost 2 cup finals in the most contentious circumstances. Valentine's the referee for both of them. Not that I'm bitter or hold any grudges or anything like that. And then we also lost the league to Aberdeen as well. So Davy's first season, 3 runners up. The second season, we had the Rapid Vienna stuff going on, had all that to deal with, which was Celtic were worldwide news and whatever on the back of that. And then I think in many ways that we salvaged the season right at the end with the 100th Cup final.
Yep.
We're a goal down. You remember a horrible day. Remember the Hampden was absolutely crammed. I don't think it was an all-ticket game. Crammed, dangerously so maybe. And then we scored these 2 incredible goals. Talking about the 25 Cup final with Patsy and Jimmy McGrory. They 2 goals in that Cup final, I don't think you'll find that anywhere. Davies' free kick. Problem was a wonderful player, wasn't he? What a talent he was. Fabulous winger. He puts that one in the top corner. And McGarvey, he's no right to. Big Aiken goes on a run, charges down the right wing and lobs this cross in. Frank, I think's halfway out the exit at Kings Park, and he still manages to flick his head. And I think Hamish McAlpine's ready to take the by kick. And then and that's another one. Frank McGarvey's, that's his last act as a Celtic player.
Yeah.
That was the Saturday, and he sold to St Mirren on the Monday because we couldn't keep. I think Davy felt he could only run with 2 main strikers, and Frank maybe was the older. He expect maybe 30, 31. So I think Davy Hay was up against it. I think he achieved admirably despite that. But 85, he won the cup. I say 84, beaten narrowly in all 3. 85 won the cup, and in 86, then Davy will always have Paris. We'll always have Love Street.
Yeah.
Because again, 7 minutes to go. It's a Celtic story, isn't it? I remember I've been there with my dad, God rest him. We're standing, horrible day at Paisley. We went because we go anyway. Did we really think we were going to, those events would turn out? Not in a million years. And I still remember, this is spine tingling stuff. I remember Celtic absolutely destroyed St Mirren. I think we'd struggled against them fairly recently. And the goal I remember, you talked about Danny earlier. This is Danny. The goal we remember, can't remember who scored it, Tino. Don't ask me. But the goal starts in our own box with an overhead kick for Danny.
Yeah.
Paul McStay's playing 1-2s. Brian McClare sticking at nutmegs. And Mo Johnson finishes the goal off. Be the bigger man, Matt. Mo Johnson finishes the goal off. The first half is just unbelievable. Then the second half's a bit of an anticlimax because we've done our bit. I think we needed 3 if they lost. We've got 4. And then we score. McStay scores another incredible outside of the boot, Brazilian style. I think it's Owen Archdeacon cuts it back and Paul hits it on the run. Murdo dummies it. Bang. Sensational stuff. Where had it been all season? Bangs at the back of the net. And then I remember McClure scored out. We scored up my 5th goal. I remember captured in Scott Sport brilliantly. Jock Brown's the commentator. We're in the corner flag at that end with the main stands on our right hand side. And I remember Jim Stewart, former Rangers Kelly goalkeeper. He's picking the ball up, looking what to do with it. And the next minute, spine tingling stuff. You get goosebumps here. Next thing, you just see this ripple going round the terrace, and it was the days of old transistor radio, wasn't it? like to my dad, what's going on here? But you know what's going on, don't you? Instantly, you know what's going on. The next minute, the place, it's liftoff, and you can see the people are signaling for the dugout, and you're like, scored.
Yeah.
You're looking, thinking,
There's a famous picture of Davy Provan
Yes.
saying 2-0. He's got the
Send it
fingers up. Oh,
yes, it's in the
brilliant.
book. Thank you for that promotional ad there. And then, I don't know how many minutes later, then there's this other roar, and the Love Street was pretty much open at both ends. You remember it with the covering? And you're just looking round, and there's people dancing and hugging. You're thinking, can he possibly be? And
Mhm.
it was. So, I don't know. And I like saying watching Celtic. I don't know if there's been many more unexpected titles. So, Davy got that, but
Mhm.
then the following year, we were back to. So they brought Souness in about the April time. The one at Glasgow, I remember going to Ibrox with like 40 odd thousand on a Glasgow Cup tie on a Friday night. But they then in 86, 87 didn't go well, and I think the writing on the wall was there for Davy. But
Mm.
he never like to see a good guy
Yeah.
treated unfairly. So I won't pretend to know the story or whatever. People have their own version. But
Of course.
if events are as they are transcribed, then that's not good.
Yeah.
But there's another thing. That was the Davies. That wasn't the end of Davy at Celtic Park under Tommy. Davy came in. I think his title was Chief Scout. But to my understanding, Davy was responsible for guys like Van Hooijdonk and Di Canio and Andy Tom. Davy got all these guys in. So
He was around initially when Wim Jansen came in.
Yes.
I think he moved on during that time, but he was around initially with Jansen and Murdo McLeod.
Yes.
Just on Love Street before I forget to say, so I wasn't there that day. So were you there?
Yes.
Incredible. Yeah. So brother James, who's on the show here with us, and my dad were there.
Yep.
With my dad's pal Noel, and Noel was Noel Callahan, transistor radio kind of guy. So he was one of the guys getting the news through at the time, and just incredible memories. And that goal you speak of, finished by Mo Johnson, as you say, let's be the bigger men about it. But my good friend Paul speaks about that, and so many speak about it as just potentially one of the greatest Celtic team goals of all time. It was just such a goal. Yeah. It's a shame that your man happens to be the one on the end of it, but an incredible goal on an incredible day for Celtic, and an incredible achievement by Davy Hayes' side. Yes. There's also just a kind of puzzling fact that Celtic then broke their transfer record to sign Mick McCarthy, I think from Man City.
Yes.
Or Billy had maybe managed him.
Yes.
Yep, £500,000, and I think he got £1,000 a week. And Davy Hay brokers that deal, is allowed to make that signing, and then has moved on. It's just strange stuff. But I said that we don't need to dwell on Billy McNeill, and we don't, but let's do it anyway.
Okay.
Just give us your kind of, I don't know, is it possible to just summarise Billy McNeill and what he means to Celtic?
Yeah. Billy McNeill, where do you start? So, talking to tour sometimes, you talk about certainties in life, death taxes. When I was a wee boy growing up, death taxes weren't really an issue. The certainties in life where Jockstein would be the manager of Celtic, Billy would be the captain, and Celtic would be the European Cup as champions. I was about 15 before any of those variables changed. So Billy, I guess, as a young lad watching Billy grow up, Billy makes something about Billy McNeill isn't as majestic. He had the physical presence, looked like a big film star as well, didn't he? And of course, they've got that Lisbon image in marble, which is the most incredible image. Also, just an incredible ambassador for Celtic. So whether he was as a player, and then he went to Clyde and Aberdeen, very quickly came back. And I think most folk, you wouldn't have got a bet on Billy McNeill being the man to replace eventually Jockstein. I wish it hadn't happened. I actually wish it had happened a year earlier when Jock won the double. I think Jock was never quite the same after the car crash or whatever. So that last year was awful. But when Billy came back in, and in Billy's first year, the Fairy Tale Club again, what did we do? We win the league in the last game of the season against Rangers with 10 men, being one goal down, and we somehow turn that Murdo's clearance into the top corner of the net. Just quite incredible thing. Sadly, there was a press strike or TV coverage strike, so the images aren't great, but just one. So Billy came. So Billy was a winner as a player, an absolute star as a player, and he came back as a manager, carried that on. I think Billy won a trophy in every one of his seasons. Every one of the seasons it was there, Billy would win the League Cup, even a League Cup. We couldn't buy a League Cup win, but we couldn't buy a win in that. But remember Hampden and Rain, my dad's birthday, God rest him, in 1982, absolutely saturated. I think I'm still drying out now. And Charlie and Murdo again gave us that League Cup. So Billy won the clean sweep, and obviously he pulled together a fabulous Celtic team. So I also had the pleasure of dealing with him, and just very occasionally when I was involved with the supporters club. I remember phoning up to try and inquire about getting a player for a dance, and I phoned Celtic Park, and it's a lady saying, "How you doing? What can I help you?" Give me a wee second. 2 seconds later, "Hi, it's Billy McNeill. What can I do for you?" You're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
So just a lovely, lovely man. I hated what happened. I remember seeing Billy doing the European draw. I think it's for European Cup in Lisbon, and he was struggling to open these contraptions that they put up with, and I was, willing him to get on, and obviously at the statue unveiling. So not often a man sees his own statue being unveiled. Maybe that's a marker. I'm glad he did, but Billy McNeill, everything. I think it was you and I said this chat saying, can you name somebody that's contributed more to Celtic? Oh goodness, you're struggling, aren't you? Some great Celts up there and some great competition, but you're struggling to see past what Billy McNeill done for Celtic. So I don't know if that covers it.
It only scratches the surface, but the ultimate Celtic hero, Matt.
Absolutely.
And it's a nice place for us to round off this conversation. In terms of the book itself, so it's on pre-order just now. I think it's the 5th of September. It comes out for good. But tell us where people can pick up a copy if they're looking to do so.
Yeah, pre-order at the moment at CelticStarBooks.com/shop. One of these days I will get that right. It will be in the Celtic official outlet. Celtic, as always, have been very generous and supportive. But it will be in there when it arrives. Basically, when it arrives here, it'll be in the Celtic shop the following day. So certainly no later than the 5th. We might be able to bring it in a wee bit earlier, but the date we're working to is the 5th of September. So those are the two main outlets at the moment. Yeah, and at the moment here, there's been an incredible response, and I don't know, I think it might be twofold that you've touched on. Is David Potter's last work, but David is renowned for his brilliant writing on Celtic, but also it's just a hugely memorable era, and it's an era that resonates with so many folk. I believe, actually, before I forget, that there's the possibility of getting some signed copies by Danny McGrain. Yes, Danny's kindly agreed to do so. So we're promoting that out. That's one of the reasons I think that response has been so great, is that we've been out there. As you say, what a combination. David Potter, Celtic in the 80s, and Danny McGrain signed their copy. Danny's still an absolute legend. That's still around the stadium. So get in quick. You're no fast, you're last. The world's worst salesman strikes again. But seriously, when they're done, they're done. But what we're trying to do is get that book out there, get David's work out there. Let's get this book sold out. Brilliant. And that's a legacy for DP. That's what I'd love. Really looking forward to grabbing a copy, Matt. But just to finish off, your own final thoughts on this another incredible decade in Celtic history. Oh my goodness. So I think each time you look at an era, I guess you know some things, you don't know everything. You actually start to delve in and package it all together. And then I love the fact that we've lived through that as well. So whether you've lived through that, whether your dad's told you about it or whatever, it's got everything in there. Wonderful Celtic, inspirational captains, wonderful managers, fabulous attacking players, Celtic tragedies, triumphs, and whatever, everything in one package. So another great chapter in the Celtic story. So please don't miss it. Perfect, Matt. Pleasure as always to have you back here on the Celtic Exchange. It goes without saying that we wish you the very best with the book, and we'll catch you again really soon. I really appreciate that, Tino. Lovely to talk to you, sir.
Only twice in the history of the Scottish Cup have goals been scored direct from a free kick. Is this a bit of history? It is! David Crowther.
Paul McStay. Last Stuart needed 2 bites. Now that must be a goal for Dundee. Sheer bedlam around the stadium. Well, you don't need to hear any more news than that. Dundee clearly has scored at Dens. And it's lift off here at Front Street. Oh, what incredible scenes.
They're stuck. McAvenny. Frank McGavin has won the cup for Celtic.